Happy Father's Day. I love watching people's reaction to those videos. And some of you have this look on your face and you're like, are they saying what I think they're saying? Yes, we are saying what you think we're saying. We want every part of your life to be above average, even that part of your life. We want it to be something that you get to enjoy, that you get to live ahead of the curve on. We love every single aspect of our lives, and Jesus wants every single aspect of our lives to be ahead of the curve, to be above average. If you're here for the first time, we just want to say how grateful we are that you carved out an hour or so of your time, especially on Father's Day, to join us and be here at Red Rock. That means so much to us. We're so thrilled. We're so glad that you're here. Today, we're going to be wrapping up this series of talks that we've been in for the last couple of weeks called Ahead of the Curve. And I actually need your help today to wrap up this series. So would you do me a favor? Would you take out your phone? Because I need you to participate in something as we go through this. And if you attend Red Rock on a regular basis, no, I'm not asking you to sign up to serve or to give or to do anything else as I ask you to pull out your phone today, okay? Here's what I need you to do. You're going to participate in a survey a little bit later on in the message. So I need you to text this word, Red Rock, all lowercase, no spaces, to that number that's on the screen. Now, some of you that maybe are not as technologically savvy, you're wondering, do I put a 719 in front of that? No, you don't need an area code. Yes, a 5-digit number will work. You don't need all 10 digits. Just text the word Red Rock to 22333. See what we did there? Help you remember? 2 2s, 3 3s, okay? So 22333 and the word Red Rock, all lowercase, and all one word, no spaces, okay? And then you can put your phone away or you can keep it out. You can, be on Facebook or Instagram or whatever for the rest of the service. But I'm going to ask you to participate in a survey a little bit later on in the message. And in order for you to participate, you need to accomplish that. Now, while you're doing that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. Back when I was in high school, I was absolutely in love with the sport of basketball. In fact, I still am. I love basketball. And when I was a freshman in high school, I played basketball at a school in Orlando, Florida, although I grew up in the country of Australia, and that explains my weird mixed-up accent for a lot of you in the room. I grew up in Australia, but I did my freshman year of high school in Orlando, Florida, and I played basketball at this school, and I absolutely love basketball. Just love it. It's my favorite sport. And so I loved it so much that I actually asked my parents, after we went back to Australia, after my freshman year of high school, I asked my parents, could I go back to the States and graduate from that same school? Because I'd like to play basketball my senior year of high school. And my parents, I'm so grateful, they said, yes, you can do that. And so I went back to Orlando to graduate, and I played basketball there, and I practiced basketball all the time. I loved playing. In fact, I had friends who kind of thought my obsession with the game of basketball was a little over the top, and they would ask me all the time, they'd say, Jason, why do you practice so much? Why do you spend so much time at the gym? Why do you spend so much time at the playground? What is it with basketball? Why do you practice so much? I even had a girlfriend. I know it's kind of hard for some of you to believe that I had a girlfriend in high school, but I had a girlfriend who asked the same question. In fact, she was kind of like, hey, why don't you spend as much time with me as you do playing basketball? And I used to tell my friends, I used to tell this girl, that's the price you pay to be in the NBA. See, my fascination with pithy little rhyming statements started long before I ever started preaching, okay? I've been into this thing for a long period of time. I would tell my friends, that's the price you pay to be in the NBA. Now, in week 1 of this series, I introduced you to a concept that I learned my freshman year of university. I got conned into by the university taking a class called quantitative research, which was their sick, deceitful way of having everyone take statistics, okay? And I was introduced to, my first year of university, this concept, the bell curve. And I remember trying to understand it, wrestling with it, not really fully understanding it, but here's what I know now. If in high school I had understood the bell curve, I would have understood that that's the price you pay to be in the NBA was not a true statement about me as a basketball player. Because I was squarely, probably somewhere right in the middle, or maybe even to the little bit to the left of the middle on the bell curve when it came to all the athletes, all the high school basketball players in the state of Florida. I was squarely in the middle of the bell curve, maybe even a little bit to the left. I didn't understand back then that more than 99% of the high school basketball players in Florida that year were probably not even going to make it to play college basketball. Most likely, less than 1% of all the players in the entire state might make it to Division I college basketball. And then out of all those players that were playing college basketball, less than 1% would probably make it to the NBA. Newsflash for all the parents in the room, okay? Your child is probably not going to play professional sports, okay? They're probably not going to be a professional soccer player, lacrosse player, whatever it is. And the thousands of dollars you're spending on summer camps this year, all the coaches are thrilled that you're spending that money. But they're probably not going to end up in the NBA or whatever it is you think they might, because averages, people that land in the middle here, is what is true about most of us. In fact, we said it in week 1. Averages are an indicator of what is most true of most of us. What was most true of most of the people I played basketball with in high school is that we weren't going to play in the NBA. In fact, not a single guy that I played ball with is playing in the NBA right now. Because averages tell us what is most true of most of us. So throughout this series, we've been looking at this message that Jesus preached, that Jesus taught on the side of a mountain one day with hundreds of people in the audience, which has become perhaps his most famous message of all time, entitled the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, last week, I invited all of you to take home with you a copy of his entire sermon, and invited you, kind of encouraged, maybe even challenged you to take the 10 to 12 minutes that it takes to read his entire most famous message called the Sermon on the Mount. Now, if you weren't here last week, maybe you're traveling or this is your first time ever at Red Rock, that's awesome. We're pumped that you're here. If you'd like a copy of his most famous message, we'd love to give you a copy. So I've got some volunteers that are up the back that would love to help you out. If you just want to raise your hand real quick, we'd love to get you a copy of this, his most famous message, so that you can have a copy of that. Just hold your hand up really high. We got some people running around, and they'll get you a copy of this so that you can take it home with you. Perhaps this week, you went home with your copy, and you actually read some of Jesus' message. Towards the end of Jesus' message, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus actually describes what I would consider his version of the bell curve. His version of the bell curve looks something like this. He described two different kinds of roads. The first road is what he calls the wide road. Jesus says most people travel on the wide road. In fact, you might even say 99.7% of the population are going to travel on the wide road. Jesus describes the wide road. He says it's an easy road. It's not difficult to get on the wide road. It's not too hard to travel along the wide road. In fact, there may be some people along the wide road that are cheering you on, saying, great job, you're going well on the wide road. Here's a bottle of water for your trip. Maybe stop, take a selfie. Haven't seen you in so long. The wide road's kind of a nice road to travel on. Then Jesus described another road. He calls it the narrow road. He says the narrow road is more difficult. In fact, he would say that the narrow road is somewhat even hard to just even find. If you're walking along in life, if you're driving along, you may even miss it if you're not paying attention. The turnoff to the narrow road is not necessarily easy to find, and you'll find that there's not many people on the narrow road. You'll find that walking down the narrow road is sometimes difficult. And so Jesus describes this idea, or his version, I think, of the bell curve between people that kind of live an average life and people that live ahead of the curve. They live an above average life. We've been looking at some of Jesus' famous topics that he taught in this message over the last couple of weeks. Jesus, over and over again in the Sermon on the Mount, he's constantly taking what is average, what's expected of people, and he's raising the bar and inviting people into an above average way of living. Or he's inviting people to say, hey, let's get ahead of the curve. I want to invite you to the narrow road, a life that's so much better than average. In week 1, we took a look specifically at the topic of relationships and how Jesus taught about relationships, he says that people who live ahead of the curve exceed others' expectations. And when he talked about others, he wasn't just talking about anybody, kind of generally any other person's expectations. Specifically, Jesus was teaching you can exceed others' expectation, even people that have perhaps wronged you. He said it this way: somebody insults you, turn the other cheek. Exceed their expectation. They would expect you to shun them, not talk to them anymore. He says, no. If somebody insults you, I want you to live ahead of the curve. Come on the narrow road. Exceed their expectations. Somebody exploits you, he says, go the extra mile. Somebody takes something from you, literally steals something from you, maybe a possession or a reputation. Jesus says, here's how you exceed They're stealing from you. Here's how you exceed their expectation in that. You not only turn the other cheek, you not only go the extra mile, but give them the shirt off your back. Jesus says when it comes to relationships, even the ones that are in tension and in conflict, exceed others' expectations. That's how you live ahead of the curve. Last week, we looked at another concept that Jesus taught in this sermon. He says that people who live ahead of the curve, they live for later. He says average people over here on the wide road, all these people, they're consumed with the here and now. He says don't do that. Don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, what you're going to wear. Are you going to be able to retire or not? Do we have enough money for all of our bills at the end of the month? Are we going to be able to go on a vacation? That's what average people worry about. Their lives, Jesus says, are consumed with that. They're constantly worrying about that. Jesus invites us to live ahead of the curve, to live above average lives, and he says, I want you to focus on the future. He says it specifically this way: put first my kingdom. That means put first his agenda, his plans in this world, what he wants to accomplish, not yours, but his. And at the end of last week, we said it this way: when it comes to worry, you will worry less about the temporal, here and now, when you focus first on the eternal. It's amazing. If your life is consumed by worry, you're constantly concerned about the here and now, Jesus is like, I want you to live an above average life. I want more for you than that. I want you to focus first on my agenda, my plans in this world, and you'll discover along the way that you will actually worry less when you do that. If you're new to the whole church thing, if you're new to the whole Bible, and maybe, quite honestly, you're here today, but you're still a little bit skeptical about the Bible, and maybe you even think to yourself, man, it seems like the Bible is just a list of things you should do and a list of things you shouldn't do. That's what it seems like. I hope you don't miss this. If you only get this one thing today before you leave, I hope you don't miss this part. God sent his son because he wants you to live an above average life. He's preserved the Bible for us, not so we have a list of things that we should do and shouldn't do, but because it's a guide for our lives to live above average lives, the very life that your Heavenly Father, my Heavenly Father, so badly wants for us. That's why he's preserved this thing called the Bible. That's why we still have his most famous message available to us thousands of years later, because he so badly wants you to live an above average life, a life that's ahead of the curve. Jesus, in this incredible message, he covered many, many topics. In fact, historians would say that the sermon actually went on all day. It wasn't just 10 to 12 minutes. That was kind of Matthew's summary. Matthew was a guy that followed Jesus around in the first century while Jesus was alive, and he recorded for us what Jesus said in that famous message. But historians would say the message really went all day. The sermon was taught all day, and Matthew summarized it for us. There's so many things Jesus talked about. Here are some of the things in his sermon that he referred to. He talked about murder, adultery, divorce, revenge, love, money, generosity, prayer, worry, health. Really covered many different aspects of our lives. That's why it's such a powerful, powerful sermon. So last week, I invited you, if you were here last week, to go home and to take the 10 to 12 minutes that it takes to read through this incredible sermon. And even if you haven't read it, I think you're going to be able to participate in a quick survey of what Jesus was talking about. So I'd love for you to just take out your phone real quick. I asked you to text that number, Red Rock, text the word, I should say, Red Rock to that number that's up on the screen. If you haven't done that yet, you can go ahead and do that. And then I want to just give you a quick survey, quick quiz on some of the topics. And you'll see the question up on the screen. It says your health will improve if you, A, and you can just respond by texting the letter A if you think this is the right answer, eat whatever you want, whenever you want. B, never exercise and binge watch Netflix. Or C, eat a well-balanced diet and exercise regularly. Or finally, both A and B. Now, I'm so glad that people's photographs are not tied to the survey or that your phone number doesn't pop up, because this was kind of an easy one to begin with, okay? So the answer to this question is actually C, okay? So eat a well-balanced diet and exercise regularly. That was a pretty simple one. All right, second one, next category of things. Your marriage will be stronger if you, A, spend little to no quality time with your spouse. B, are completely exclusive sexually with your spouse. C, have intimate relationships outside of your marriage. That could be difficult for whoever put in C, but that's okay. And then both A and C, all right, could be an answer as well, all right? I think we're getting the averages now. This is good. B is the right answer. Okay. All right, next category. Next category is your career. Your career will advance if you, A, look for ways to help your organization reach its goals. B, continually show up late for all meetings. C, take a 2-hour lunch while your team is busy working. Or my favorite, D, spend all day laughing at cat videos, okay? Got some cat video fans in the audience, obviously. All right, so obviously the answer to this one is A. And 80%, the average over here, 80% of us got it right, which is good. All right, final category, final question. Your finances will improve if you, okay, this is tricky. Listen to the wording. A, spend more than you make, okay? B, spend less than you make. C, cash out your 401k to buy that boat you've always wanted. Somebody really wants a boat. Or D, never do a tax return, okay? Look at all these people taking care of the IRS. You guys are awesome at this. So it's a great survey, and I understand. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, Jason, it's so obvious what the right answers are. And what's most true of most of us in the room is that we all know the correct answer when it comes to our finances. It's pretty simple. Spend less than you make. When it comes to your marriage, it's pretty simple. Like, be exclusive with that spouse. If I start sleeping around with other people, that's probably going to do some damage to the marriage. It's not going to be stronger. When it comes to your career, think about the organization's goals and probably invest time in trying to get those goals accomplished. I think most of us in the room know the answer to these questions. And Jesus actually talks about this specific issue as he wraps up his most famous message. This is where he actually lands the plane on all these topics that he discussed. He lands the plane on this very issue. You could say it this way. Average people know what to do. Looking over here at the bell curve or the wide road, Jesus might say, average people know what to do. People that are hanging out on the wide road, people that are walking the wide road, they know exactly what to do when it comes to their finances, when it comes to their marriages, when it comes to their career, relationships, whatever it is, they know what to do. But Jesus is about to invite us into living an above average life. He's going to invite us to discover what it looks like to actually walk the narrow road. Here's how he begins as it relates to this topic. He says this, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine. Every time you see the word therefore in the Bible, here's what I want to invite you to think about. Think about this statement. In light of everything that's just been said. So every time you see that statement, therefore, think to yourself, in light of everything that's just been said. So you have to go back and figure out what is it that what Jesus was talking about. Here's what Jesus is saying. This is the end of his message. He's saying, in light of everything I said in this sermon, in light of every topic that I've covered, in light of everything in your life, everyone who hears these words of mine, and he goes on to give two stories that are kind of contrasting in nature. He uses this idea of two people and he compares their stories to help us understand what it is that he really wants us to know in light of everything that he's just talked about. Now, typically, maybe you did this even this week as you were reading it. Typically, we would just read through these two ideas that Jesus is going to give us about two different people, and we just read through it as the verses flow chronologically. But today, I want us to break up the verses and actually read through them in parallel so that you can see the contrast and comparing that Jesus is using. So he goes on to say, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and blank is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. In contrast to that, if you skip down a couple of verses, he begins the other side of the story. But everyone who hears these words of mine and blank is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. So what's in the blank? What is it that Jesus says in the blank? Perhaps Jesus says, everyone who hears these words of mine and understands them is like a wise man. It's not what Jesus says. Perhaps Jesus says, everyone who hears these words of mine and takes notes on what I'm saying is like a wise man. Surely that's what Jesus might say. No. Maybe Jesus says this. Everyone who hears these words of mine, and every time I say something profound, they go, yeah, that's good, is like a wise man. That's not what Jesus was saying. Here's what Jesus says. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and posts them on the internet is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Or maybe takes a picture of his words and puts them on Instagram. Or perhaps writes them down and tweets them is like a wise man when you do that. No. Here's what Jesus says. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. By the way, nothing wrong with agreeing with what Jesus said. Nothing wrong with taking notes on what Jesus says. Nothing wrong with posting them on your social media. Nothing wrong with that. But Jesus says, you want to live above average? You don't want to be on the wide road? You want to walk the narrow road? Then you're somebody that puts these words of mine into practice. In contrast, Jesus says, but everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And then Jesus goes on to continue with these two contrasting stories. And before we jump into what he says next about these two people, I want to pause just for a moment and invite you not to miss the point that Jesus is about to make. Especially if maybe church is new for you, maybe the idea of following Jesus is a new concept for you. Please don't miss what Jesus is about to say. So important as he goes on with these contrasting stories. He says this. He goes, the rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house for the wise man. Look what he says about the foolish man. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Jesus is explaining to the crowd, and he's letting us know as well, that when it comes to the storms of this life, they don't differentiate between wise or foolish. Don't think that by following Jesus, or that by attending church, or by even putting his words into practice, it will protect you from the storms of this life. It doesn't differentiate. The person that goes to church, the person that doesn't go to church, both are going to face the storms of this life. The rain's going to come whether you practice his words or you don't practice his words. The wind's going to blow. It doesn't matter whether you're a church person or not a church person. The storms of life are going to come. We've all experienced them. Maybe you're facing a storm right now. Maybe one's just finished for you, or maybe one's just about to start. Here's the point Jesus is making. Foolish or wise, the storms of life will come. But what happens to your life when the storms of life come is different for those that are on the wide road and those that are on the narrow road. Here's how Jesus wraps it up. For the wise man, when the storms came, it did not fall his house, because it had its foundation on the rock. For the person that didn't put his words into practice, who he calls I'm not calling you a fool, but Jesus says that's foolish when you hear them and you don't put them into practice. Here's what happens to your house. The winds came, blew against that house, and it fell. This language is so powerful, with a great crash. Here's the promise that Jesus is giving us. When you hear these words of mine and you put them into practice, the storms of life are going to come. But what happens to your life is different than if you don't put these words of mine into practice. Ever seen somebody whose life looks like it's just falling apart, it's in chaos? Maybe you've even experienced some time in your life. You're like, man, it feels like my life is falling apart. It feels chaotic right now. Jesus is saying the difference between the wise and the foolish when the storms of life come is that the wise man, his house will stand firm. The foolish man, their life is going to fall apart. You could say it this way, that follow through will determine a firm or a faulty foundation of your life. Not hearing the words, not just writing them down, not even posting them on the internet, but when the storms of life come, and they will come for all of us, those that put his words into practice, their life is on a firm foundation. Those that don't, it's on a faulty foundation. Here's what Jesus is saying. Average people know what to do. They know what to do. Most of us in the room, no matter what area of our life we're talking about, we probably know what to do. But above average people do what they know. They don't just know what to do, they do what they know. So I just want to ask you a simple question today. Very simple question. What do you know to do that you're not doing? Think about that for a moment. What area of your life do you know what to do that you're not doing? Maybe this week as you were reading through this, or perhaps this next week if you just got this and you're reading through it, maybe there's a topic that Jesus covers and you think to yourself, I know what to do in that area of my life, relationally, my finances, with my health, whatever it is for you. I don't know what it is for you. I don't know the answer to that question, but you know the answer. What is it that you know to do that you're not doing currently? And then I thought this week as I was preparing, well, that's nice, Jason. You get to ask everybody else this question because you strap a microphone on your face and you're up on a stage. But have you ever asked yourself that question? So I did. I asked myself, Jason, what do you know to do that you're not doing? It was interesting. Middle of the week, I have a friend of mine who's a pretty famous preacher and an author. He was speaking at a big conference this week, the Southern Baptist Pastors Conference. His name's Ray Pritchard. He's one of my favorite speakers. He's a great friend of mine. Speaking to probably 8,000 plus women and men that are leaders in the church across the country. And his topic for that message was how to survive your critics. I was like, that seems interesting. I thought I'd click on it, and I clicked on it. Starts out, he says, I'm not going to tell you how to outwit your critics, how to overcome your critics, but I'm going to share with you some words that might help you to survive them. Starts off, of all places, Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies. And I thought, wait a second, I don't have any enemies. I don't think of people in my life as enemies, and I'm sure you are the same. You probably don't think to yourself, man, I got a list of enemies in my life. I don't think of people as my enemies. He says, love your enemies, pray for those that persecute you. I'm like, well, when I think about it, there are some people that maybe have said some things that hurt, some things that maybe I didn't like or whatever. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking to myself, man, I know what to do. Jesus says, pray for those people. But am I actually doing it? So I sat down and I actually prayed for a list of people. I thought, man, I need to do what I know to do, which is pray for your critics. But I don't know about you. I don't know your story. When you answer that question, what do I know to do that I'm not doing? I don't know what that is for you, but you do. This week I did something else as well. Several years ago, our oldest son, Xavier, started high school. And I thought to myself, I've only got a few more years left with Xav at home, so I'm going to invest some intentional time on a weekly basis with Xavier. So every Thursday morning, we go out for breakfast together. Hope I can get through this. This summer, probably the last summer that Zav's going to be in our house. he'll go into his senior year next year and he'll graduate, and he's planning on, at least at this point, going to a Bible school down in Australia, which I'm super proud of. It's an amazing thing that he's thinking of doing. But this last year of high school, I've been thinking about doing something with him for the last year, but I hadn't put the plan into place yet. So this week, I decided I'm going to go online and I'm going to sign up for that thing that I had planned to do with him for his senior year. Because I know what to do, but that's just average. Average people know what to do. Above average people do what they know. And so this morning, just want to encourage you, as we wrap up our time together, what is it that you know you need to do, but you're not doing yet? This series, as we kind of review what we've covered, maybe it's something in this series. Jesus said that people who live ahead of the curve, they exceed other people's expectations. People that live ahead of the curve exceed others' expectations. Do you need to exceed somebody's expectation? People that live ahead of the curve, they live for later. They're not just consumed in the here and now. Is there something maybe you need to do this summer to invest in the future, to be a part of what God is going to do? I think Cuz I Love You Summer, this initiative we're doing, an incredible opportunity to focus first on the eternal and worry less about the temporal. And then finally, Jesus wraps up everything that he talked about and said people who live ahead of the curve, they do what they know. So, let me summarize what Jesus is saying. Above average people, they know what to do. But average people do what they know. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, thank you for preserving this incredible message that Jesus taught a group of people on a hillside thousands of years ago who struggled with the same things we struggle with. Thanks for allowing us to have the portion of what he said available to us today. God, I know that you want us to live above average lives. So would you help us? Would you help us not just to hear these words, not just to know what to do, but God, I pray that you'd help us to do what we know. Give us the courage to do that, I ask. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much for watching one of our past messages. If at any time during this message you decided to place your faith in Jesus, we're so excited for you. We would love to help celebrate with you and also help you take a next step. You can click the Next Steps button below to connect about baptism, community groups, or beginning your faith journey. If you'd like to support what God is doing in and through the city of Colorado Springs, you can click the link below or text the word GIVE to 719-888-3880. You can also give through our mobile app. And if God has used Red Rock Church to work in your life, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to share your story, the easiest way to do that is to click the Share a Story button below or just email us at info@redrockchurch.org. Thank you again for watching this message. We hope to see you in person at Red Rock Church very soon.